Okay, funny story. So when I was a kid, I took a few piano lessons and I learned how to read music, but I was always frustrated with reading music because I felt like I could learn songs more quickly and easily just by ear. I'd always look up my favorite songs, listen to them, and figure them out. Well, I thought I was pretty cool in 4th grade apparently because I decided to figure out how to play the real Slim Shady. And so I figured it out and I was super pumped. I was excited. And I decided to play The Real Slim Shady by Eminem on the piano at my school talent show. It was the most awkward thing. I felt like nobody knew the song I was playing. It wasn't some beautiful piece of music or anything like that. I mean, there were kids playing the violin, there were people singing, and there were people who just, were classically trained, and here I am with my 2 lessons of piano and just figuring out music. And that was so embarrassing. Anyways, today we are not talking about my 4th grade talent show or my piano skills or lack thereof. But today we are talking about compression. Compression is super important, and when I started producing, I had no idea how to use it, so I'm gonna break it down for you guys. When I first started producing, one of the things I wish I would have known how to do or understand is compression. So today I'm just gonna give you a quick 101 session on how a compressor works, and I'm gonna use it specifically for vocals so that you get an idea of how compression can take your vocal production to the next level and why it's important. If you like these videos, don't forget to hit that thumbs up, make sure you're subscribed so that you don't miss future videos, and if you ever have any questions or wanna see more content, check me out on Instagram. Okay, so I've got my vocals here. I'm gonna show you just a little snippet of what it sounds like with the whole song. What are you doing later? Baby, boy, I've been waiting for you. What are you doing? So there's my vocal chain, and by the way, if you missed my last video, I announced that I have a stock lead vocal preset available for download. I'm going to put a link in the description. Basically, you're getting the, as close as you can get with these third-party plugins, but with stock sounds. And that's what I'm actually going to be showing you in this video as I show you how compression works. Baby boy, I've been waiting for you. Okay, so let's jump right into it. So if you notice here, I have my whole vocal chain set up, but I'm gonna leave it to my first compressor to show you what I've got going on here. So basically the only adjustments that I've done to this audio recording so far is some gain staging for the overall mix, some EQ, simple, and then this is the first compressor we're adding to the vocals. Now, I say first because something that's a best practice is to have multiple compressors. And the reason behind it is because the more compressors you have, the less work each compressor has to do to compress your vocal. In this case, I'm going to show you how I add my first compressor to my vocals and break down the settings so that you understand how to do this down your vocal chain and for other situations. So the first thing you're going to notice here is this is a stock plugin inside of Logic. If you go into Dynamics, Compressor, this is what populates. Now, there's a ton of knobs here and it seems super overwhelming, but it's actually pretty straightforward. There are only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 settings that you really need to worry about here. Now, you'll notice that there are different compressors here available, but Platinum Digital, if you actually go to the Apple website and go into the manual for Logic, it actually shows you what kinds of things these compressors work or are designed for. Platinum Digital works really well for vocals, so I like using that. So these are the 5 knobs that you need to understand in order to compress your vocals. One we have is threshold, then we have ratio, makeup gain, attack, and release. That's it. These are the only knobs that you're going to be touching in here, and it's going to make a huge difference. So the first thing I want to talk about is what is compression. The simplest way that I can put it is basically you're trying to reduce the distance between your loudest part of your recording and your lowest in volume part of recording. And make that distance a lot shorter. You may be asking, why would you want to do that? The reason you want to do that is because in a recording, you want to be able to hear everything, right? You want to be able to hear the lowest in volume just as clear as the highest in volume. So when you actually bridge that gap and make that gap a little bit shorter, so basically the distance between your loudest and your lowest part of your recording shorter, then it makes for a more consistent sounding audio clip. And that way it's just consistently within that same range of volume so that you can hear everything, right? Okay, so let's talk about threshold. What you're telling the compressor with the threshold is basically whatever you set it to be. In this case, I've got it to negative 46.5. I'm saying anything that is above negative 46.5 dB, I want you to compress, right? And how much I want you to compress is determined by these other knobs. So we'll jump into that in a second. So what you'll want to be watching here is this meter right here, the needle in the meter. A good rule of thumb is that you want, as you're playing the audio clip, you want it to be around negative 3 dB. So you don't want it to go all the way up here. You don't want the needle to swing all the way up here because that's very, very aggressive compression. And the reason you don't want to do that is because when you are too aggressive with your compressor, it kind of dehumanizes and takes some of the life out of the recording, especially with vocals, because it's just not natural. It's not natural for me to have a consistent volume for every single word I say. I sound more like a robot, right? So it's more natural to have a little bit of wiggle room between my loudest word and my lowest word. And that's why compression is so important. Watch the needle here as I play the audio by itself.
Baby boy, I've been waiting for you.
So you notice the needle is moving. Basically, that's telling you what's happening, right? So as soon as it hits a threshold, it's compressing here. And like I said, a good rule of thumb with vocals is that you don't want to compress too much after negative 3 dB. It's okay if some of your peaks go there, a little bit past it, but for the most part, you want it to be hovering around this area and not moving all the way out here. So if I move the threshold all the way as far as it goes, it's just going a little bit too far. So I'm gonna set it here at like negative 46. So now that you've set your threshold, now you have to tell the compressor, okay, what do you want it to do to the vocals that are past that threshold? So ratio. So basically what the ratio is what you're saying is, if my ratio is at 3:1, it means that for every 1 dB, my audio recording is above the threshold. So every 1 dB that's above the threshold, I want the compressor to compress 3 dB below that dB amount. So the higher your ratio, the more aggressive your compressor is. The lower your ratio, the less aggressive it is. So I have this one set to 3:1. But a good safe zone is 2:1. So for every 1 dB that it's above the threshold, you're asking the compressor to compress 2 dBs.
Baby boy, I've been waiting for you. What are you doing later? Baby boy, I've been waiting for you.
That's it. That's how simple the ratio is. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is attack and release. So before I go further, I just want to thank today's sponsor. This video is sponsored by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online community with thousands of classes to choose from, filmmaking to music production to art, all sorts of things. If you want to learn something, chances are there is a course about it on Skillshare. It's super affordable at less than $10 a month. So I am a huge fan of filmmaking. I love making movies and the power of telling stories through video. I've been taking this course by Dan Mace that talks about how to properly tell a story through video. And it's just great. So if you want to learn something new, check out Skillshare. There's going to be a link in the description. The first 1,000 people to click on the link will get 2 months of premium membership for free. All right, let's dive back into compression. You'll notice as soon as I press play, it takes a minute for the needle to actually move. And that's because my attack is set at 4.5 milliseconds. Now, what attack means, attack and release, is basically when you're telling the compressor to turn on from when your vocal starts, when you're telling the compressor to turn on, and how long do you want the compressor to hold its effects until it releases. So let me explain. I've set the attack to be 4.5 milliseconds. That's a quick attack. If you'll notice, that's all the way on this side, where the slowest attack is about 200 milliseconds on this compressor. So when I press play, see how it takes a little bit before it starts actually compressing? Your attack and your release determine how smooth the software actually compresses the vocal and how more seamless it is. So typically with vocals, you want it to attack right away, especially because when you start a phrase is when you have the most volume. So you want the compressor to take into effect very quickly so that you don't have like these really high peaks. So I've set it to 4.5 milliseconds on this one. And then the release, we want the compressor to actually hold before it actually goes back down. So you'll notice it's a little bit slower to come back down on the meter. So because we have a quick attack and a slower release, you're going to notice that the needle moves up more quickly than it moves down. Watch again. Takes longer before it goes back to 0. That's our release. So this attack and release setting, I feel works really well, especially for R&B, but you can tweak these based off of your project. So that's threshold, ratio, attack, and release. Those are the most important settings. The last thing that you want to know here is makeup gain. And basically, because you are reducing volume in your overall track by compressing, now that you've compressed it, you want to make up for that volume loss, right? You want to make your audio recording louder. And how do we do that? With makeup gain. So it's making up the lost gain. Gain is your volume. So in this case, I've added 3.5 dB to my overall compressed recording. So I'm going to mess with this knob here so you can kind of get a feel for what is happening.
Baby boy, I've been waiting for you. What are you doing?
You might be wondering, why did I only add 3.5 dB? Well, like I mentioned at the beginning, this is only my first compressor on my vocal chain. If you notice on this vocal chain, I have a multi-band compressor and I have another compressor, and then we have a couple of de-essers, which are essentially compressors for a specific frequency. So there's a lot of compression that happens with vocals. And the very first one is just to kind of tidy it up. You want it to get rid of those very high peaks and make sure that everything is kind of consistent. And then as you add more compressors, like I said, the more compressors you have, the less harder they're working in order to make your vocals sound great. So now that I have my first compressor set up and ready to go, when I go and add my next compressors, like let me go halfway through my chain here, they're not working nearly as hard to get it to sound crisp and clear. Now if I add all of my compressors and my bus effects,
Baby boy, I've been waiting for you. What are you doing later?
So here's my vocal chain with third-party plugins.
Baby boy, I've been waiting.
And the stock version.
Baby boy, I've been waiting.
Sounds just as good. So again, if you want to get this vocal preset, the link is in the description. Check it out. Let me know how you guys feel about it. I know it's going to take your productions to the next level, but you'll be able to tweak all of the settings in there. It's fully customizable. You'll be able to tweak the settings to your liking and your style of music. So there you have it, guys. That is compression in a nutshell. Hopefully this demystifies it a little bit for you. I know as soon as you open a compressor, it seems super complicated with so many knobs and the graph and the meter, and just trying to understand what it all means can be overwhelming. But hopefully this video helped you. If it did, don't forget to hit that thumbs up. Make sure you're subscribed if you want to see more videos like this. And as always, if you ever have any questions or want to see more content, check me out on Instagram. Keep making beats.